Welcome back. So I'm going to take a look at a Canadian division that may or may not happen. But considering that today Bill Daly's come out and said, hey, we're still aiming for January 1st. Problem with that is, of course, they haven't had any actual official meetings, even over Zoom, as far as I can tell. So they're aiming for January 1st, but whatever they do, due to the border being in the state that it is, which is closed, I would think that we may very well see a Canadian division where players come over, they quarantine, and then they go out on the ice. And by having Canadian teams only play each other, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to come up with a schedule that's going to work. And it's fun. Admit it, Canada, this is fun. And for Americans on their side of the border, the idea of, if you're a fan of, say, San Jose, seeing Vegas more, Vegas seeing San Jose more, there's something to that rivalry where you want to see those teams you don't like a little bit more. And so we'll see how it works out. Now, what I've done, I've organized it according to where I think they probably finish. But these teams are going to be close, and I'll give you a number as to why. Wins from last season: 36, 37, 36, 37, 36. Those are the top 5 teams on the board. Montreal had 31 last year, and Ottawa had 25. Ottawa, they're going to be better this year. Montreal, well, they have some optimism in Montreal that things are going to get better as well. So this should be a dogfight. This should be a dogfight between teams that are going to be pretty darn close to one another. So we'll start off with Toronto at the top. Going to get into gambling just a little bit as well. And because sometimes you see those odds, and not all of us know exactly how the odds necessarily work. So I'm going to explain that. So the Toronto Maple Leafs were 36, 25, and 9 this past season. Finished with a .579 winning percentage. Second best among Canadian teams behind Edmonton. So they are given odds right now of plus 1,500 through OddsShark. And I went with OddsShark because why not? That is 5th in the NHL. The top odds right now are the Avalanche at plus 650. Tampa Bay, Vegas, and Boston are the top 4 in terms of betting right now for the Stanley Cup in 2021. Now, what that means is that for every $100 you wager, you make $1,500 if they win the Stanley Cup. Now, for people who wonder what the negative, because again, there may be people who don't understand the whole odds thing. If it's negative 140, let's say that Toronto had a negative 150 as their odds of winning the Stanley Cup, which would be ridiculous. Nobody's a favorite like that before we've played a game in the regular season. That means you would need to make $140, or you'd need to wager $140 to make $140. So you wager $140, they win the Stanley Cup, you get $240 back. Right now, you wager $100, you get $1,600 back. You get a profit of $1,500. But that's where it becomes kind of tricky because, all right, I'll wager $100, I can get $1,500 back. They have to win the cup, so you get it. So the odds, yeah, you get paid out big, but there's a reason that there's long odds for certain teams. So that explanation aside, I've decided to go with the starting goaltenders here, leading scorer, and adds and subtractions, and trying not to get into absolutely everybody, just the players that I think are probably going to be really key here. So Freddie Anderson for the Leafs. He's their starter. Very good starting goaltender. And I think it's perfectly fine if they keep him all season. If they risk maybe losing him as a UFA next summer, I don't think that's necessarily that dangerous. I think he wants to stick around. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. So goaltending, I think they're in good shape there. Austin Matthews, their leading scorer, 47 goals, 33 assists, 80 points. This is why when people say, do you think Matthews will score 50 next year? I go, yep. I think he's, as Ovechkin gets older, and eventually Ovechkin won't be the best goal scorer in the NHL, in theory. So that Matthews, I think, is ready to take that mantle. So for all of the negativity around him sometimes and the detractors, I think he's probably going to be the best goal scorer once Ovechkin eventually turns, 80? Anyways, so Matthews there. Their additions, TJ Brody, Joe Thornton, Wayne Simmons, Aaron Dell, Jimmy Vesey, Travis Boyd, Joey Anderson. There are a lot of additions in there, and I didn't even have Lettinen on there either, who's coming over from the KHL, right? And I don't have Robertson on there because he's a rookie. I'm trying not to have all the rookies on there too, but it's a lot. Basically, the Toronto roster, there's going to be a lot of turnover. A lot of new faces in that lineup. How do they gel? How do they work together? Can Vesey show some of the reason why teams were having a bidding war on him 4 years ago. Remember that? Bidding war for Jimmy Vesey. And then it doesn't work out. On the outs, Janssen, Kapanen, Barry, Ceci, Clifford, and Rodriguez. I got Rodriguez on there because I thought they'd keep him around for the fourth line, but he opted to go back to Pittsburgh. So, for me, losing Barry would be a more glaring need that they would have to fill if Barry had a great season, but his season was up and down. And this was a team that lost to Columbus in the play-in round. So I think that took a lot of wind out of the sails of Kyle Dubas and the team, and they understood they needed to make change. Now, they brought in Simmons to kind of toughen themselves up, but they also lost Clifford. And I think that's something that we can kind of gloss over, but losing Clifford, I think, hurts. I think if they'd kept Clifford and if they'd had Simmons as well, you got some truculence there. Brian Burke would be quite happy. So adding Thornton helps. I think Anderson's going to help in that regard as well. A lot of depth there. So that's why Toronto, I think, is favored as the number one team. Edmonton, 37-25-9, 585 overall winning percentage. Their odds, plus 2,000. Koskinen's their starting goaltender, and goaltending could end up being an issue for them. Draisaitl, of course, their leading scorer, 43 goals, 67 assists, 110 points. I do expect McDavid to be their leading scorer next season. Their ads, Turris, Barry, Cahoon, Puljujarvi, I consider an addition because he's coming back. Out, Green, and Benning. There's not really anything big. Now, Klefbom's not on that list. That could be huge if Klefbom's out for a long time. Ken Holland saying he's not putting him on LTIR. He doesn't see the need to put him on LTIR right now, but it'll happen. It's going to happen. So the Oilers, to me, I think, are probably the second best. But their .585 winning percentage is better than Toronto's. But, of course, they lost to Chicago in the play-in round. So there's going to be people who say they're overrated and they're not going to be that great, yada, yada, yada. All that other wonderful stuff. Now, the difference between them and Calgary looks big. Your winning percentage is .564 for Calgary. They were 36-27-7. When you look at it, they had one less win, two more losses, two less overtime losses. It's really not that big of a gap between the two. And yet, the gap, when you look at the betting, it's plus $3,000 if you're betting on the Flames to win the Stanley Cup right now. Yeah. So, Markstrom's their starter. To me, Markstrom, amongst this division's goaltenders, is one of the better goaltenders. I would put him ahead of Koskinen. I put him ahead of Anderson. You guys all know. You guys saw the list. I don't need to go through all of it again. But Markstrom, I think, is an upgrade for Calgary in net. Kachuk's their leading scorer this past season, 23 goals, 38 assists, 61 points. One of two Canadian teams with a Kachuk leading them in scoring. That's interesting. Their ads, of course, mostly connects. Tanev, Markstrom, Levo, all from Vancouver. Of course, they added Domingue as well. I didn't put him on the board. Nordstrom, Simone, and Nestorov. So they added some depth, but they lost as well. They lost Brody, Forbert, Gustafsson, Reeder, Talbot, and Jankowski. But you're going to find, I think most Flames fans are pretty excited about this coming season. And I think that what they've done, I think, has made them better. I like the depth moves they've made, although they'll miss Reeder on the penalty kill. They will. Toby Reeder, for all the jokes we make about Reeder, decent penalty killer, decent bottom six forward. So for Calgary, it's really a matter of how well everybody gels for them. As much as I'm going to talk about the gelling for Toronto, that could very well be an issue with Calgary as well, especially over a shortened season, right? We may very well see a 48-game season, maybe 60. And so with a protracted schedule to try to get the Stanley Cup awarded at a regular time, it could be very important to have that chemistry right out of the gate, right? Now, on to Winnipeg. Alakazam. With Winnipeg, 37-28-6 was their record. .563 winning percentage. So they're 1% behind, or 1,000% winning percentage wise behind Calgary, and 2 behind Vancouver. Very little to choose. Very, very, very little to choose. One more win than Calgary. One more loss than Calgary. One less overtime or shootout loss than Calgary. That's it. Hellebuck's their starting goaltender. I think that keeps them in it. Connor and Scheifele tied for the lead in points on Winnipeg. 38 goals, 35 assists, 73 points for Connor. 29 goals, 44 assists, 73 points for Scheifele. So If you're Patrick Laine and you want first line time, Connor's the one denying it to you. And he was on pace for, he could have been 40, I'll say 45 goals worth at the end of the year. Now their ads, I like Stastny. Stastny's a good addition. Thompson, good solid pickup, and he'll be wearing Rick Rippon's number this year. Forbert and Tony Nato. And Tony Nato, I think, is a good fourth line option as well. So I kind of like low-key what the Jets have done. The problem is I don't know that they've upgraded their defense enough. We talked a lot about their blue line. Maybe Ville Heinola jumps in and takes a spot there. Maybe there's other moves made for the blue line this year before we get to the season, but I still have some concern with their blue line. Out, Bitetto and Eakin. Cody Eakin was brought in as the latest experiment to try to fix the center spot, and he did well enough, but he's not a number 2 option. Stastny is. Also added from Vegas. So we'll see how Winnipeg does this year. I kind of like their chances, to be honest, of going on a run in the playoffs, maybe more than almost anybody else. But think about this for a second. This means that if we had 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3 in the playoffs, you'd have Toronto versus Winnipeg and Edmonton versus Calgary in the playoffs. I think fans would be pretty happy in those cities. But I'm not overruling Vancouver at all. Vancouver, 36-27-6, 565 winning percentage. So they were third on this board in winning percentage. But, again, I like Calgary's additions. I think Winnipeg's going to have a bounce back year. And I think it's going to be a dogfight. Now, the starting goaltender for Vancouver, you would think it's going to be Holtby. It's possible it ends up being Demko. Not going to rule out Demko, but I'm going to say Holtby for now. JT Miller was their leading scorer, 27 goals, 45 assists, 72 points. I don't expect him to be a point-a-game player again. Miller had an amazing season, was absolutely fantastic for Vancouver, helped get them to where they got in the playoffs. I don't expect that from Miller again. I expect more points from Pettersson. I expect him to be the leading scorer this season. Now their ads, Holtby, Schmidt, and Haralick. And depending on how you look at Haralick, they seem to be excited to pick him up. We'll see where he fits into the lineup. And for Vancouver, it's going to be an interesting overall situation to view because they lose Markstrom, Tanev, Levo, Toffoli, Stetcher. A lot got made of Toffoli being out for Vancouver. I just want to stress again, though, in this video, Toffoli was barely a Canuck. He was a Canuck briefly. It was long enough that we got this idea of how well he might play with the Vancouver Canucks, but he wasn't really a member of the Canucks for that long. So while I wish we'd held on to him, I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world. Part of the reason Toffoli was brought in was because of injuries in the top 6. If not, they may not have made that move. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but I do think Vancouver's going to be similar to last year. Last year, remember, this was a team that 36-27-6 had run into some problems when Markstrom got hurt and Demko had his struggles. Now, betting odds for the Jets are plus 3,500, so 3,500 for every $100 you bet, plus 2,000 for every $100 you bet on the Canucks. So the Canucks are given the same odds to win the Cup as the Oilers, and they're behind the Leafs in that category. So again, and the odds just gives you an idea of what people in general are thinking in terms of who should be the Stanley Cup favorites long before the season starts. So I think the dogfight would be between Winnipeg and Vancouver, which would be a throwback to the old Smythe Division days, right? Right. Montreal, 31-31-9, 500 winning percentage. So just right across the board, average. Plus 6,000 in terms of betting. And Carey Price is their goaltender. Now, adding Allen means they're going to be better, because it means you're going to give Price more rest. It means you're not going to have to worry about if Price gets hurt, you're done. So yeah, that's what's going on there. Now, Tatar, their leading scorer, 22 goals, 39 assists, 61 points. I do not expect Tatar to be the leading scorer this year for Montreal, because I think Nick Suzuki's going to just blow it up. I think the kid's going to be fantastic. Now, their additions, Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, they've added on the wings, and they look pretty solid. And, of course, Romanov, likely coming in as a rookie, probably is going to end up in that top 4, could really change things for Montreal quickly. And the only out, really, of note, really, is Domi. So, Max Domi's out, Anderson's in, Toffoli. I don't know that Bergeron's necessarily done, though, either. Oh, and, of course, Jake Allen. Gotta make sure. And I know there's other guys I don't necessarily have listed here. I just tried to go with just the basics, but if anybody's missing, it's not like there's a whole calculus that went into this video. It's just basically here's how I think they probably end up. But adding Jake Allen does definitely help things for Montreal, and adding some scoring depth on the wings I think helps. And part of it too is the real risk here for Bergeron is risking that Kotkaniemi that showed up. The Kotkaniemi that showed up in the playoffs is going to be the Kotkaniemi they get in the regular season this year that they didn't get in the regular season last season. So there's some risk to that, but Suzuki looks fantastic. He's quickly becoming one of my favorite players in the NHL. Just such a smart player at both ends of the ice. The comparisons to Bergeron, and I know people say, oh, it's way too early to compare him to Bergeron. I don't know that it is. I mean, Bergeron was really good right out of the gate too, and everybody loved him right away. And, you know, you can't teach that kind of hockey sense. You either have it or you don't. And in Suzuki's case, he has it in spades. So, and Montreal fans would say, well, he's not going to compliment us if he doesn't have to, which is probably accurate, right? But anyways, Montreal, I think, will probably be just on the outside. The other thing that's interesting is if these teams are only playing each other, there's going to be a team that ends up with an ugly record that might not have an ugly record if they were playing in their actual regular division. Say like the Atlantic or maybe the Pacific, right? Now, Ottawa, 25, 34, and 12, 437 winning percentage. And if you put down $100 on the Ottawa Senators, you can win $10,000 for each $100. Isn't that nice? Nice, tidy $10,000. The problem is they have to win the Stanley Cup. They have to win the Stanley Cup for you to get 10 grand. So it's kind of like a lottery ticket that way because the odds are not in your favor. Matt Murray is going to be the starting goaltender. His bounce back is necessary if they're going to stay competitive in this division. Can't have an off season at all. He has to be dialed in right out of the gate. I think he's capable of it. I do. I absolutely think he's capable of it, but we'll see, right? Brady Kachok led them in scoring 21 goals, 23 assists, 44 points. Far and away the lowest number on the board, but that's going to change this year. Their additions, of course, Murray, Dadonov, Galchenyuk, and I just put rookies on the board because there's likely going to be multiple rookies joining this lineup. This is going to be a very young team with that sprinkled experience in there that throughout the lineup that should help. I think Dadonov was a fantastic addition, and again, I think Murray is going to be an upgrade over Craig Anderson. Craig Anderson finished out his time with Ottawa last year. Love Craig Anderson myself, but I think Murray's the upgrade at this stage. Out, Borowiecki. I'm still shocked that Borowiecki's not going to be wearing a Sens jersey next season. That's really weird. Anderson. That's of course Craig Anderson, so not to mess up Anderson's here. This is Joey Anderson, Craig Anderson, and of course Freddie Anderson. Anthony Duclair and Harlock. Now, Duclair, I feel like I need to put a question mark next to Duclair because he could very well end up circling back and signing with Ottawa. It could happen. I don't know that it does, but it could happen. Ottawa's one of the few teams that actually has cap space, and Duclair may have to accept a short-term deal for a lot less money than he might have expected. Duclair, keep in mind, he was in the All-Star game and he got off to that great start, but when he cooled off, it was an abrupt drop for him. So the overall picture for Ottawa, I think the future's very bright. I don't see how they compete with the other teams in this division. I think Toronto's probably the best team in this division, but it's going to be close because I don't think any of the top five are going to make it easy. And I think that there's going to be a lot of... I would imagine, too, that with the schedule where you're just playing against other divisional rivals, a lot more fighting. Where we could end up seeing, like, I'm not going to say 80s level fighting, but it's going to be a lot more than usual. Because these teams are really not going to like each other. You have a 48 game schedule. You have to play each of these teams 8 times. You're not going to be happy. And it's that easy. You have a 48 game schedule, you play each other 8 times. If it's a 60 game schedule, you play each team 12 times. So, again, as fans, maybe like, oh, we get Toronto, Vancouver again. But if it's just for the one season, it's fine. And honestly, like I said, familiarity breeds contempt, and it would lead to some really amazing games. I remember 80s hockey. I remember seeing teams 8 times a year that were in your division, and we didn't get sick of seeing teams. We didn't get upset about, oh, we're seeing them again. Usually it was, this is great. It's Vancouver, Calgary. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And I kind of look forward to that level of rivalry again, should this happen. So the big question is, again, I think the top 5 are all very close. I think for me, Vancouver I have down here because I do think it'll be tough for them to overcome the losses that they've gone through. For Calgary, I think they've improved themselves. I think Edmonton has as well. I think Turris is a huge steal for them. Puljujarvi being back in the lineup is big as well. And overall, I still think Toronto's probably going to be the best team. But then the question becomes, can any of these teams win a Stanley Cup? And that's a whole other discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about which team you think would win this divisional battle. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And, the betting odds thing is weird. But keep in mind, last year, everybody was betting on Tampa. I thought that meant they were jinxed. But then almost a year later, they won it in the most bizarre, long season we've ever had. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.